They didn't build a camp. They dug a coffin, climbed inside, and dared the world to bury them. 33 kilometers of earth, timber, ditch, and sharpened death seal from both directions. 50,000 Romans chose to trap themselves between 80,000 starving warriors on the hill and a tidal wave of hundreds of thousands rising over the horizon. Not for glory, not for mercy, because as Julius Caesar said, there was no other way to win. And when Caesar said win, he meant survive. It is 50 to BC for 7 years. Caesar has shattered Gaul, but one man fuses it back together, versing an idea with a sword. After Gergovia, Caesar tastes humiliation. Vercingetorix retreats into a mountain fortress the Gauls call unbreakable. Alesia, Roman generals eye the cliffs and the rivers and whisper the obvious, don't attack. Wait, starve them out. Caesar stares at the hill and sees not a citadel, but a cage. He won't storm it, he'll erase it. So the legions drop their swords for shovels. They carve a ring of walls, facing inward, circumambulation, then a second ring facing outward, contravallation, between deep ditches, flooded trenches, sippy buried stakes, lilia wolf pits, and stimuli. Iron barbs. The ground itself becomes a weapon. A battlefield turns into a machine. And then, as hunger gnaws the hill and fear tightens the valley, the western horizon darkens. The rescue army has arrived. When Caesar first surveys Alesia, he ignores the towers and the taunts from the walls. He studies terrain. The Optum crowns a steep height girdled by rivers and ravines. An uphill assault would be a blood mill. A conventional siege would invite a Jic relief force to hammer his exposed rear. So he chooses a third option, the kind of solution that makes sane men suspicious. Turn the entire valley into an engine. Orders crack like whips. Circumventulation first. Roughly 18 kilometers encircling Alesia. Cut into the living ground ditches, ramparts, palisades, towers at measured intervals, firing platforms aligned for crosskill. The legionaries, veterans of 7 years of fire and frost, sheath their gladi and swing knatics. Sledges and spades, dirt flies, timber slams into trenches, stakes are driven until palms bleed. The line takes shape not as a camp, but as a cage. A ring meant to starve hope hands stop the sudden. Sortie at the moment, hunger turns courage into madness. But Caesar's genius is anticipation. He knows desperate men will charge. He sees the killing ground with layered horror. Two major ditches forward of the wall, one broad, one 5 meters deep, some filled with diverted river water to swallow men and ladders alike. Beyond them, he plants 5 rows of sippy buried trunks with sharpened points angled toward the enemy and bound like ribs of a wooden reef. Ahead of the sippy, he lays out 8 staggered rows of lilia. Lies, they joke, though nothing about them blooms. Wolf pits a man deep with fire-hardened stakes at the bottom dusted over with brush to disappear. Into grass and moonlight, further stout he scatters the stimuli. Iron hooks set in blocks buried. Shallow meant to tear feet, hamstrings, and resolve. It is geometry is cruelty. Every step either slows wounds or kills. Every pause invites a Roman javelin. And then he does what even his own officers call madness. He repeats it all again in reverse. Because beyond the horizon the tribes gather. A Dawi or very carnates answering the call of a united Gaul. A second ring contravallation, roughly 13 kilometers, faces outward with the same ditches, stakes, lies, and barbs. The Romans have stopped being besiegers. They are now besieged by design. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watches the line snake and harden. At first he laughs. Caesar, the conqueror of Gaul, reduced to a ditch digger. But scale dissolves laughter. Towers sprout, earth rises. The trap isn't for Romans, it's for him. He has food for 30 days, 80,000 warriors, and a promise: a relief army will come. If he holds, hunger and time will break Rome. If he breaks out, those traps will shred his army before it reaches a single ladder. Outside, 50,000 Romans stand between two worlds. To the north and west, smoke columns hint at marching hosts. To the east, the hill bristles with spears. There's no room to maneuver, no line to fall back to. Only the corridor, a few hundred meters of packed earth to walls, and the certainty that when the storm arrives, it will strike from both sides at once. Caesar tightens the machine. Archers from Crete, slingers from the Balearics, artillery crews underscore ballisti and scorpiones. Centurions count pilla, ration bread sharpen stakes. Men learn the map of death they have planted, the exact places where feet sink, where ladders die, where the range is perfect. Night falls over the sieges in one. The valley doesn't sleep. Wood creaks, ropes groan. Water glugs in the ditches, and on the ridge, the war horns of Gaul answer the Roman trumpets like thunder answering iron. Alesia, once a fortress, is now the bait inside a double-wall trap. But the Romans are trapped with it, buried alive by their own hands, waiting to see which side of the cage breaks first. Time becomes a weapon sharper than any gladius. Inside Alesia, the ration tables shrink. Grain bins hollow. Horses disappear for scouting and return as bones. Water is measured in sips. 80,000 warriors can roar like a storm, but they can't eat the echo. Councils meet in low voices. Hope stains every sentence with a question. When will the relief force appear? In the Council of Chiefs, one voice suggests what despair always keeps in its darkest drawer. If the warriors are to fight, someone else must starve. The word they do not want to say is the word the ancients remembered: cannibalism. It is not a plan, it is a blasphemy. Vercingetorix understands that even a rumor of it will shatter the sacred myth he's forged. One goal, one fire, one freedom. He refuses, but his refusal is not mercy. He chooses a different cruelty. Drive out the mouths that cannot fight. The gates yawn. Thousands, women, children, the sick, the old stumble out into the scraped no man's land between the Optum and the Roman lines. They lift empty hands toward the palisade and beg the universal plea: bread, water, life. They offer servitude, tears, anything, on the ramparts. 50,000 Romans look down and wait for their generals. Orders Caesar measures what pity would cost. His own stores are thin. His men are already buried, alive between two armies. If he feeds these civilians, he feeds Alesia. If he lets them back in, he bolsters Vercingetorix. If he takes them captive, he spends blood he'll need for the storm. So he issues a command as cold as iron. No one passes. The legionaries hold their ground. Patrols push back those who try to crawl under the stakes. The human tide stalls between the walls. The valley fills with weeping that no trumpet can drown. Days stretch, throats crack, bodies thin, then fail. Both armies watch. This is warfare by psychology. Victory through erosion. Caesar is sending a message carved into hunger. There will be no bargains, no gods, no honor, only outcomes. On the ramparts of Alesia, chiefs who once cursed Roman cruelty now curse necessity. Vercingetorix's authority bleeds under a silence heavier than any battle shout. Inside the Roman lines, veterans clench their jaws. They've butchered men in ditches, burned towns, crossed frozen rivers. But this, not acting, is the hardest order some ever obey. Night brings other torments. Gauls probe the lines with sudden sorties, testing ditches, mapping where lies hide, throwing fastens to choke trenches. Archers lose under moonlight. Slingers stitch air with stone. The machine works. Men fall into pits. Stakes find thighs. Hooks tear feet. Romans answer with pilla that arc like meteors, and with discipline that never sleeps. When attacks falter, the valley goes quiet again, except for the groans of those who aren't fighters, who aren't allowed in, who can't cross out. Then, distant at first, the ground trembles. Room returns to rhythm, rhythm to thunder. Scouts rush in speaking numbers as if they are gods. 200,000 more. A horizon of shields and horses and banners. The greatest relief force Gaul has ever gathered. Fires bloom like a second dawn along the western ridges. From the palisade, the Romans see it plainly. The trap has closed and they are inside. Trumpets call stations. The outward-facing towers bristle. The inward-facing ramparts tighten. Between them, the corridor narrows to the width of fate. This is the battle Caesar chose. A war on two fronts with no retreat, balanced on ditches and sharpened wood. and the stubborn will of men who buried themselves alive to win. The relief host appears like weather rolling lines of infantry, 8WO elite cavalry, and a sea of wicker shields glittering with bronze. They select the outer wall contravallation for the first hammer blow. At a signal, riders surge. Infantry follows with ladders and gabbins. Then the ground answers with the traps they cannot see. Horses scream as their chests meet the Scipi. Men vanish waist deep into Lelia. Feet rip on stimuli hidden under dust. From the towers, Roman pillar falls like iron rain. Cretan arrows hiss. Balearic stones punch men from saddles. Blasty skewers rank 3 at a time. The first wave breaks, but it teaches. The Gauls withdraw, gather breath, and prepare to learn the machine's rhythm. Night thickens. On the hill, the besieged hear the battle and taste hope for the first time in weeks. Inside Aleia, fires wink, ladders are counted, axes and fastens bundled. The plan is as old as anvil and hammer. The relief army will strike from outside, Vercingetorix from within, and Rome will be crushed between. Trumpets dueling in the dark turn the valley into an echo chamber. Under cover of night, the relief force changes tactics. Shields overhead, fastened thrown surgically. Projectiles to blind the towers while teams fill the ditches one brush bundle at a time. At the same hour, the gates of Alesia explode open. Gauls pour downhill, starved, furious, their bodies light, their wills heavy, aiming not to kill, but to bridge the killing ground with their own lives. Men hurl themselves into pits so others can step on them. The machine was designed to break charge. It now must break fanaticism. Inside the corridor, Romans fight back to back. One line faces outward, trading missiles and curses with the relief host. The other braces for ladders clawing at the inner wall. Centurions pace the narrow walkways, counting heartbeats, redistributing pilla, plugging leaks with bodies and orders. Tortoise loose, drop, stab, replace. The air clots with smoke and dust. Torches paint chaos. The ground becomes clay stamped by sandals, glazed by blood. Somewhere along 33 kilometers of fortification, there is always a place where the weight is greatest. Caesar knows it. Mounted, wrapped in his crimson cloak, more signal than garment. He rides the corridor like a fuse, stopping where screams not, where ladders bite, where resolve flickers. He doesn't swing a sword. He lights men with a nod, with a sentence bitten through his teeth. There's no after if we fail here. Veterans straighten. Recruits stop shaking. Companies that had sag press forward until the crews on the towers felt their timber bones sing. The hours lengthen into a single elastic. Now on the outer wall, the relief army is second, and third assaults bog down as the traps pile bodies faster than faces can fill voids. On the inner wall, Gauls claw over the lies, pack the ditches with corpses, and get hands on the palisade. Roman scorpions snap. The first rampart shivers, a ladder hooks. A centurion shatters it with an axe and is pulled down in pieces for his victory. Every narrow gate becomes a throat that can choke or swallow legions. When the moon sets, both sides sway. The Gauls withdraw to the ripple of horns, leaving the outer fields littered and the inner trenches clogged with the dead. The Romans don't cheer, they breathe. They reset pilla, haul more stakes, and wait for dawn. The hour of reckoning, when the enemy won't attack everywhere, but exactly where the machine is weakest. Somewhere on some segment of the vast ring, wood is thinner, slope is steeper, earth is looser. Caesar knows his engineers had to compromise in one place, the northern hill. Too steep for a double wall, there stands a camp that relies on height more than timber. He looks north and tastes the shape of what's coming. At first light, G-scouts confirm what Roman engineers had prayed would stay secret, the north. There, the ground had forced Caesar's men to build a single fortified camp clinging to a slope where ditch and rampart can't fully mimic the deeper layers to east and west. In the council of the relief host, a new name carries command. Vercingetorix, kin of Vercingetorix, leader of 60,000 handpicked blades. His orders vanish into the night, march the long arc behind Roman lines, and at noon fall like gravity on the northern camp. As the relief force slides away to the flank, the valley holds its breath. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix readies his last gamble. Every man who can stand, every ladder that can cling. The plan fuses like lightning. When the hammer lands on the north, the anvil inside bursts from the gates. A synchronized catastrophe for Rome. Trumpets, noon, the north erupts. Veras of Lonus pours down the hill, not into the teeth of Lais and Seppi, but toward the ramp roads and gates of the elevated Roman camp. The slope that once guarded the Romans now funnels pressure into their doors. Shields slam. Peel a flash, lines bend. The defenders fight 10 to 1, every pilum thrown with aim. That's more prayer than angle. On the opposite rim, the gates of Alesia blast open. Vercing hurls his 80,000 like a broken dam. They don't climb over the traps, they fill them. Bodies become bridges. Blood greases wood. Momentum counts more than pain. Dispatch riders skid into Caesar's command post. Faces white. The north is buckling. The inner wall is failing. There are no reserves left. He committed them all to plug leaks in the night. He has one asset, a few thousand horses and his reputation dressed in scarlet. The obvious move is to reinforce the north, directly more men into a funnel that choose men. He chooses the impossible. He rides out of the contraption with his cavalry. He leaves his own fortress. He gallops the long bow outside the battle, skirting the tides and traps, risking arrows and accidents. He aims not at the front of Vercingetorix, but at his back. It is a maneuver that seems like madness until it lands like myth. On the northern slope, Roman defenders are breaking. Centurions form circles to die well. Standards tilt. Then a horn blasts from behind the Gallic elite. Eyes turn uphill where no Roman should be. And there, tiny against the sky, a line of horse crests the ridge, a dot of red blazing at its head. A thought detonates down the Gallic ranks faster than sound. Caesar is loose. He was supposed to be trapped, nailed into his own walls, drowning in ditches. Seeing him free behind them breaks something more sacred than formation certainty. Panic ripples. The rear crowds the front. Messages garble. Commands drown in the animal hurry to face an enemy that shouldn't exist. Caesar doesn't bring numbers. He brings terror delivered at a gallop. His German riders don't fight pretty. They tear. The perfect wedge of 60,000 becomes a churn. Front trying to press forward into the Roman camp. Rear turning to brace against the cavalry. Middle crushed into chaos. At that exact heartbeat on the ramparts, the defenders who had been folding suddenly rose. Lean as blood to his ankles, hoarse beyond words, points his sword downhill. The tired cohorts become new men. They charge down the ramp. For Cavalonis elite find themselves in a vice, hammered from behind by horse, smashed from the front by infantry that fights like a thing reborn. The elite formation disintegrates, first into clusters, then into sprints, then into a slope of bodies that die the hill. Roman victory read from the walls of Alesia. Vercingetorix sees the collapse bloom like rot across a field of wheat. The shout of his warriors falters, turns thin, then breaks. Ladders drop. Feet that ran forward now scramble back. The last charge from within dissolves into a stampede for the gates. The machine, those ditches, lies, stakes, and towers has done terrible work. But the decision didn't come from wood and iron. It came from timing. From a man willing to ride out of his own fortress to make panic do what Pilla could not. Dawn lifts a lid on the valley and shows what the night made. The outer fields are a map of failure. Gavins, broken ladders, shields thrown to run faster. The inner trench is paved with bodies. Roman towers strip resin and fatigue. Veterans stare through their helmet slits at a world they built and survived. They don't cheer. They count. Who's missing? Which banner didn't come back? Beyond the northern slope, the pursuit begins. Caesar's cavalry leanest leading like a promise paid in steel drives into the retreating relief host. The order is simple and monstrous. No prisoners. Hours later, the killing slackens not because mercy blooms, but because distance does. The greatest army Gaul ever gathered dissolves into woods and rumor. Inside Alesia, silence settles. A heavy suffocating blanket. The men who spent themselves at the traps can move. The chief's council convenes not to plan, but to end. Vercinge stands thinner, older, but somehow larger. He admits the truth. This war was not for his glory, it was for Gaul's freedom, and he failed. He offers his life to purchase theirs, either as a corpse or as a prisoner. The message goes out. Caesar orders a platform raised in front of the inner line. He won't walk to Alesia. Alesia will walk to him. He sits in his campaign chair surrounded by legates. 50,000 legionaries form a silent theater. The gate opens and one man rides out, armor polished to a myth, crest proud, horse-trained to dance. Vercingetorix crosses the no man's land alone, past the bones of the civilians his council had expelled, past lies that still leak red. He halts before the platform, dismounts, unbuckles his sword, lays it at Caesar's feet, helm, axe, shield, identity, unmade. Then the king of a united Gaul kneels. Caesar doesn't speak, silence does the work. Gesture, and guards take the prisoner. No salute, no soldiers as courtesy. He will hang in chains for years, saving his execution for a Roman triumph. The way a jewel is saved for a crown. The reckoning moves from symbol to system. Caesar declares the survivors of Alesia warriors and civilians booty. One slave for every legionary. Wealth is distributed like a binding oath. The men who dug hell and stood inside it became rich, not in pay, but in property. Loyalty hardened no longer to Senate or Respublica, but to the man whose scarlet had been the one banner that didn't fall. Gold flows, Gaul's temples, strong rooms, and granaries bleed into Caesar's coffers. The legions evolve from citizen militia to professional machine, experienced in siegecraft like no force alive and fanatically attached to the will that forged them. In Rome, the news does not calm the city, it terrifies it. The Senate and Pompey Magnus looked north and realized too late that Alesia wasn't about barbarians at all. It was about Caesar. 33 kilometers of ditch and stake were more than a trap. They were a message. This is what I can build. This is what I can break. Do you think your walls will stop me? The valley greens over the years. Wood rots, trenches soften, lies become grass again. But the idea of Alesia doesn't decay. It is a blueprint for a new kind of power. Not thunderous charges and heroic duels, but total enclosure, logistics, and industrialized extermination. The ancient war of honor ends. The modern war of systems begins. On a different morning, Caesar will ride to a small Italian stream called the Rubicon and decide that nothing built at Alesia belongs only to Gaul. The true enemy had never been a hill fort in the east. It had been a frightened Senate to the south. Vercingetorix will die beneath the spectacle that turns victory into politics. But his ghost will always stand in this valley, pointing to the place where a general buried himself alive, between two armies and rose as something else entirely. If you made it here, you felt the ground shake under 33 kilometers of impossible will. For more brutal turning points and the hidden mechanics behind history's impossible victories, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens when that scarlet cloak rides man.